Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar about Hulls-Heath to Manchester Airport. My name is Jane, and I'm the Engagement Executive with HS2 Limited. We'd like to thank you for taking time today to join us. As you'll understand, we are unable to hold large information events at the moment due to COVID-19. We hope this webinar will help to keep you informed about the design refinement consultation and the updates for your area, and also give you an opportunity to ask general questions which you may have. During the webinar, you will hear from our engagement manager for your area before moving into a question and answer session, where we will be joined by a team of specialists who will answer as many questions as time permits. Please note that these will only be general questions. For any questions relating to your individual circumstances that we ask that you do send in, they must not be logged in anonymously. If you have, you'll need to provide us with your email so that we can respond to you outside of this event. These questions will not be published during this webinar, and you can also contact the help desk for further information after this event. If we get lots of questions come in about the same topic, we may group these together and answer them as one. And if we do run out of time and you feel you've not had your question answered, again, we ask that you contact our help desk. Before I hand over to my colleague, Carol, I wanted to share some technical information. We don't anticipate any technical issues during this event. However, we want to provide some advice should you experience any connection issues. If your feed freezes, wait for around 10 seconds and it will probably correct itself. If this doesn't happen, use the leave button and rejoin the call using the event link again. This should reconnect you. You'll be able to use the toggle at the bottom of the screen to rewind back to where you left the event. You can also use this function at any point during the call should you need to pause for any reason. If there is a freeze or you disconnect and you are unable to rejoin due to a wider Microsoft incident, we will email you post the incident for further information. There is also a question and answer comment function which you should be able to find at the top right hand corner of your screen. My colleague Helen will be keeping an eye on questions that come in as we go. And at the end of the session today, she will ask the team to answer as many of these questions as we have time to get through. Please note again that these will only be general questions, and any questions relating to your personal individual circumstances should be raised via the help desk. If you have previously attended one of our local information events or drop-ins, you may be familiar with our next speaker, and she will talk through the purpose of today's session. So Carol, over to you.
Thank you, Jane. Hi, I'm Carol. I'm an engagement manager with HS2, and this webinar is part of a series providing a summary of our most up-to-date plans for HS2 along the western part of the route between Crewe and Manchester and connecting to the West Coast Main Line south of Wigan and beyond. This webinar will cover the community area MA06 Hulls-Heath to Manchester Airport, which is approximately 12 kilometres extending east from the north of Hulls-Heath to the northeast of Davenport Green. This presentation will focus on parts of the community area outside of Manchester Airport High Speed Station, including changes from a design refinement consultation in 2019, smaller changes we've made to our proposals and what to expect from us in the future. A separate webinar focusing on Manchester Airport High Speed Station will take place on the 4th of November. Don't worry if you can't attend, we will be recording it and putting it on our website. All of the new information can be found on our HS2 website, or you can contact our 24-hour help desk. Details for both will be provided at the end of this presentation. First, I will summarise the design refinements that have now been confirmed for inclusion by the Minister of State following last year's design refinement consultation. The first refinement in this area was the proposal to include passive provision for 2 junctions in the HS2 design. One, to allow the future use of the HS2 line into Manchester for potential Northern Powerhouse services between Manchester, Warrington and Liverpool. And the second, to allow HS2 services between London and Liverpool to use the future MPR infrastructure. On this slide, you can see the passive provision for a future Manchester to Liverpool junction. The other junction and more detail is available as part of the published update. The second refinement in this area that has been confirmed by the Minister of State is the inclusion of the temporary railhead south of the route alignment to support construction of the new railway, and a permanent infrastructure maintenance base rail, or IMBR, as is referred to, at a separate site north of the route, and which is to the west of Ashley Village. However, following feedback from stakeholders, we've removed the Mid-Cheshire line connection here that was connecting to the infrastructure maintenance base. The construction phase drawing that you're seeing now shows the location and the maximum land requirement to build the temporary railhead and the permanent maintenance base. More detailed plans, including the railhead and the IMBR, can be found as part of the wide update we have published. The Minister of State for Transport has published the design refinement consultation document detailing the government's decision on the HS2 phase 2B design refinements to the western leg. So that document is available, and there's also an independent analysis of the responses to the consultation, which was undertaken by Ipsos Mori. Both of these are available on our HS2 website. We're also consulting on some further changes in your area, on changes to the design of Manchester Airport High Speed Station. This is one of 4 proposed refinements to the design of the new railway that we are consulting on as part of the Western Leg Design Refinement Consultation. The changes at the proposed Manchester Airport High Speed Station will be covered on a different webinar, as I previously mentioned. You can find out more information about these proposals and how to respond to the consultation on our website. This consultation will run from the 7th of October to the 11th of December, and I would like to encourage you to let us know what you think about these proposed changes. All feedback from the current consultation will be considered as part of the Minister of State's decision about whether to include these changes into the design of the phase 2B route, and these will be considered before we deposit the hybrid bill. Next, I'd like to tell you about some other changes that we have made to the design in your area. Listening to local community feedback is central to our commitment of being a good neighbour. It provides an invaluable source of local knowledge as part of the process to refine our design, to construct, maintain and operate the railway, and we try to incorporate feedback wherever is reasonably possible. There are some examples of changes we have made in response to issues and concerns you have raised, which I will cover now. We understand that you raise concerns about the visual impacts of the bridge we will be building at Mobley Road, particularly those impacts on Tatton Park. As a result, we've revised our plans. Landscape planting and habitat creation has been added in this area to help mitigate these impacts as much as we possibly can. In addition, we combined the Mobley Road underbridge and the Mid-Cheshire viaduct, removing the short embankment in between. And now we've created the Mid-Cheshire and Mobley Road viaduct. This longer viaduct provides a more constructible design from an engineering perspective and also provides better drainage connectivity. You also raised concerns that construction activities and the running of the railway could result in contamination of water courses and restrict the movement of groundwater across the Rosthern Mere. We've worked with both Natural England and the Environment Agency to understand this risk, and we've developed mitigation, which includes controlling pollution and controlling and restricting groundwater flow through an appropriate drainage scheme. More details about that is in the maps which are available online. We've also included a new public right-of-way, which you can see on the plan here in red in our design, and that runs along the west of the Mid-Cheshire line from Ashley Road to the south of Ashley. This is after you told us that you wanted to keep open the public right-of-way between the north and the south of the village. The new public right-of-way will also link existing and diverted public rights-of-way, so you were still able to walk across the Ashley area. We know that a number of stakeholders raised concerns about the permanent closure and diversions of Ashley Road. We have reviewed this, but based on traffic numbers, we believe that although the diversion increases travel time, this is still the most appropriate solution for the area. We also know that you've raised concerns about the impact on a number of sites in the area, which are currently awaiting ancient woodland designation. We acknowledge that these are potential ancient woodlands, and we will plant woodland habitat to compensate for these losses. Other changes we have made include the realignment of Sunbank Lane and a new bridge over the high-speed railway. Other new information in our plans includes where we need to do work on local utilities such as gas, water and electricity to protect supply during construction. Our newly published maps show the land required for us to do this. You can see here on the screen an example of how utility diversion works are shown on the plan. So this is showing where we need to realign some utilities near the A556 Chester Road. That pink area shows the maximum construction space we will need to provide the diverted utility. The diverted utility is shown with the dotted red line. Again, details of all the utility diversions are in the map books that are available online. Our plans will also show the construction traffic routes we will be using to move material around in order to build embankments and cut-ins. We understand that construction traffic is a major concern for people, and building the railway will require moving very large amounts of material. Haul roads are temporary routes within the construction boundary to move material from one location to another and help us to keep our vehicle off the existing road network as much as practically possible. We recently started a round of ground investigations or GI work around the Cheshire area. This will help us better understand the challenging ground conditions in this area. GI is the examination of and study of soil, rocks and groundwater below the surface. This information helps us to understand the ground conditions along the route and helps us to ensure that the new railway is constructed safely and efficiently. Further GI work will be carried out across the whole route later in our programme. The GI work will also include non-intrusive investigations, and we use radar to do this, and the radar will help to build a digital picture of what is underground. And in addition, we do intrusive investigations such as drilling and taking samples for testing. Finally, before we move on to the panel for questions, the plan shared with you today will be part of our submission for the Phase 2B hybrid bill to Parliament. This is in early 2022 or sooner if possible. This is how the government gains permission to build this nationally important infrastructure. 2024 is when we will expect royal assent to be granted. early enabling work such as utility diversions and compound setups may start soon after, but the main civil works will commence in 2026. Phase 2B will be operational between 2035 and 2040. This will be subject to further work on the study and design and delivery options based on outcomes from the Integrated Rail Programme and the National Infrastructure Commission. I'll hand you over to Helen now as we review our panel and get ready for your questions.
Thank you, Carol. We'll move on to some questions now. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our panel. Today we have joining us Anna from our environment team, Gillian from engineering, Stephen, traffic and transport, Ewan from utilities, and Paulette from the Department for Transport's policy team. As Jay mentioned earlier, we'll answer as many general queries as possible, given the time that we have. So, our first question. This is one for Gillian. Why is the airport track and section going overground when it was originally underground?
Hi. So as part of design development and with the introduction of Northern Powerhouse, the station design has been updated. So we now have 4 platforms at the Manchester Airport high-speed station now. And as part of that, with the extremely deep cutting that we previously had, that was a significant amount of spoil to be removing. So as part of cost saving and reduction of construction traffic, we've been able to raise that. The station itself is at ground level, but the tracks are still in a retained cutting below ground level.
Thank you, Gillian. The next one, will construction traffic be prevented from accessing the site north of the M56 where Chapel Lane and Sunbat Lane cross over via Chapel Lane? This is a suburban housing area that will be massively impacted and inconvenienced during the construction phase. The plans were not clear that only access via new access roads will be permitted. Stephen, can I ask that you cover that one, please?
Thank you, Helen. We will be using Sunbank Lane to access our construction. However, we will not be allowing construction traffic north of the M56 and the area to Warburton Green. Hope that answers your question. Back to you, Helen.
Thank you. Carol, this is one for you. If my land is now impacted even more than the last set of drawings, but not in relation to the amendment at the airport, how do I formally respond? Is there a consultation open?
Thank you, Helen. So presently we're undertaking a formal consultation on the 4 areas as I explained during the presentation. If you are impacted and you would like to discuss how you are impacted, then us as a local area team could arrange for you to have a one-to-one. You would have received, so all impacted parties would have received a letter which invites them to come along to a one-to-one session where we can set up a call specifically with an engineer and a land and property person and possibly an environmental person, depending on the nature of your query, where we would look at detail at your specific circumstances and advise you from there. I hope that covers that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Gillian, a question for you around the design speed of the viaduct. There's a comment saying that it looks very slow. Could you provide more information on that?
Yes, so I believe this question came in when Carol was talking about the Mobley Road and Mid Cheshire Line viaduct. So I'll take the assumption that that's about this viaduct. So the design speed of the Manchester Spur is 230 kilometres an hour, and that's because of the curves that we need to get into the Manchester Airport station. So it is a reduced speed compared to the main line, which goes up to the West Coast Main Line at Goulburn. And in addition, it also slows down to get into the Manchester Airport station as well. And all services are now stopping at Manchester Airport station.
Thank you, Gillian. There's another question as well around the airport spur line for you. So why not use the existing airport spur line?
All right, so I'll assume that that's referring to the existing train line to Manchester Airport. So as part of HS2 delivering a high-speed train line, the benefits of high-speed trains really come when we can separate high-speed trains from commuter services and freight. So if we were to connect into the existing Network Rail line, we would be competing for train paths. So by providing a high-speed connection from Manchester Airport Station into Piccadilly, we no longer have to compete for those train paths, which means that we can free up some of those paths on the existing network and travel at the speeds that we need to travel at.
Thank you, Gillian. There's a question around compensation. Carol, I'm going to see if you can respond to this one. Will affected householder compensation only be payable after Royal Assent in 2024? So, in terms of the homeowner payment scheme, where homes in rural areas do get allocated a compensation amount depending on their proximity to the line of route, then yes, that only comes into play once we get Royal Assent, which as I stated would be roughly 2024. But if your home is subject to safeguarded and directly impacted, then there is an express purchase scheme that you would be eligible for. All of the information about the different land property schemes is available online also. Thank you. Thank you, Carol. We have a question around the track being in cutting. So the track will be in cutting, so that means it'll be overground. How deep will the cutting be? Gillian, would you be able to answer that one?
Okay, so I'm assuming this is in relation to the cutting at Airport Station. If it's not, feel free to post another question and be a bit more specific about where this cutting that you're referring to is. In terms of the cutting at Manchester Airport Station, what we have is we have an artificial raising of the ground for Manchester Airport Station by about 4 to 5 metres, depending on the exact location, and the cutting below the existing ground level for the tracks, again, are about 4 to 5 metres, depending on the exact location below the existing ground level.
Thank you, Gillian. Paulette, I think this is a question for you around NPR, my apologies. When will the route from the Spurs to Liverpool be announced?
Thank you for that. Currently, we're in the process of developing the first iterations of the design for these touch points, and HS2 Limited have advised government on the potential meeting point on a future Manchester to Liverpool route, and that would be provided by NPR. So a decision on the future of Manchester to Liverpool NPR route, where the alignment between it and the touch points would not be taken by government. So for this reason, we're not sharing the potential meeting points in public to avoid. So at this point, thank you.
Thank you, Paulette. Thank you for that. We have a question. Please explain how the road junction of the A538 and M56 and HS2 works. For example, how does the journey from Altrincham direction to Wilmslow get through the junction? Stephen, would you be able to answer that one for me?
Thank you, Helen. Yes, in order to provide access to the station, we've made a small gyratory system where the current hotel sits, just to the west of junction 6 of the M56. If you're travelling from the airport through to Hale, you'll be able to travel down one leg of that gyratory system. If you're travelling in the opposite direction from Hale towards the airport, you will pass through 3 sides of that gyratory, but all the movements will still be left open and passage east and west of the M56 will still be available. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. A question around utilities now. You referred to a diversion in utilities around Chapel Lane and Hulse Heath Lane. Are these new or existing overhead pylons?
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, these will be new electricity pylons that will have to be diverted from their existing alignment.
Thank you, Ewan. There's a further utility question that's come in. Are the diverted utility areas near Chapel Lane and Peacock Lane from Hulsheath overground or underground?
I'll need to have a look and then get back on that one just to confirm.
And if we can do that during the session, that's great. Otherwise, we'll happily come back to you after the webinar. A further question on the cutting. Gillian, how deep will the cutting be where the line emerges north of the M56 in Warburton Green?
Yeah, so obviously to get under the M56, we need to go under what is already a cutting for that M56. So as we cross below the M56, our track is about 11 metres below the existing road level. Obviously, as the M56 is in a cutting itself, when we're emerging on the northern side of the M56, that cutting is approximately 15 metres deep at the deepest point, but then it raises up obviously as it comes into the airport station, but 15 metres at the deepest point.
We have a question around the plans. So the plans being confirmed, will there be amendments prior to 2024 when we are due to get royal assent?
I'll take that one, Helen. Oh.
Apologies, Carol. Yes, please.
Oh, sorry. So as I explained on the slide about the timelines, there is still ongoing work with the DFT in terms of the integrated rail programme. So whilst we anticipate that these will be the designs subject to the Minister of State's confirmation for the inclusion of the consultation changes that we will submit for hybrid bill, it is possible that when we have the outcomes from the integrated rail plan that there may be some changes to the design. So until even when we submit the plans in 2024, part of the parliamentary process is that it's open for consultation, so those changes can still be subject to design changes, the plan, as it goes through the parliamentary process. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Carol. The roads around Davenport and Warburton Green to Timperley and Sale need upgrading to accommodate traffic if all the trains are to stop at the airport. Stephen, would you be able to address that one?
Thank you, Helen. Yes, we undertake extensive transport modelling around the area, looking at the background traffic levels and then the impact of HS2 traffic overlaid on the top of that. If we think that junctions need improving to improve their operation as a result of that assessment, we will put those proposals forward as part of our assessment. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. The next question is around the station cutting. I think this is a follow-up to one earlier on. Where does the track go after it leaves the station? Is it a cutting in the same way as it was before the airport, i.e. is it just below the ground? Gillian, would you be able to take that one, please?
Yes, I can. So as it comes out of the platforms at Manchester Airport Station heading towards Manchester Piccadilly, it stays in cutting, and that cutting becomes deeper as the tracks dive down into the tunnel. So the Manchester Tunnel South Portal building is where the tracks go from a retained cutting to being in that bored tunnel, which I'm just looking at the distances now, is about 500 metres north of the end of those platforms.
Thank you. A further question, I think, for you, Gillian. How will Sunbank Lane be altered, and will this affect the bridge over the M56 leading to Chapel Lane?
Yeah, so as it stands, we are currently looking at doing a temporary realignment of the M56, and what we've done is we've adjusted that temporary realignment to avoid any demolition of the Sunbank Lane, Chapel Lane Bridge over the M56. However, because of the temporary realignment of the M56 to the south of this structure, what it does mean is that there will be a temporary closure of Sunbank Lane and Chapel Lane over that connection over the bridge for the duration of that M56 realignment works. But following the reinstatement of the M56 on its original alignment, that connectivity will be provided again. So that structure is not being touched itself.
A question around Brooks Drive. So how long will Brooks Drive need to be used for, and what will it be used for? Gillian, sorry, this is another one for you.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, so Brooks Drive, Brooks Drive is shown in our CCB, so our consolidated construction boundary, and that is for utility works. So as it stands, there is some overhead lines to the north of the proposed Manchester Airport station, and those overhead lines are severed by the location of the station. So the connection to those overhead lines is re-provided through underground cabling through Brooks Drive. So that is short-term works to just put those cables within the road, and Brooks Drive surface will be returned to as it was prior to the installation of the cables.
Thank you. Stephen, there's a question around construction vehicle traffic from Ashley to the A538 and the M56. How will construction vehicles travel from those two areas?
Thank you, Helen. Yes, from Ashley heading west towards the A538, the traffic will use Castle Mill Lane and then access the 538 at the end of junction there.
Thank you. Carol, will you be able to address a question around compensation zones? Will the householder compensation zones for the affected houses off Chapel Lane, Warburton Green potentially alter?
Hey, thanks, Helen. So the householder, the homeowner payment schemes are discretionary schemes, and they are above what is guidance is given through the Code of Construction Practice. We don't envisage that they would alter, as they're based on the centre line of the line being the fixed point, and then they come out in lines coming across. So the centre line is the fixed point, and it's based on the meterage from the centre line, so we don't envisage that they will change.
Thank you, Carol. Ewan has an answer to our earlier utilities question. Ewan, could I bring you in at this point, please?
Yeah, no problem. That area in question is particularly complex for utilities. There's a number of high pressure gas diversions required, which will be underground, but we also have an overhead power line for National Grid asset, which feeds our grid supply point, and auto transformer feeder station, which facilitates traction power for the trains. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. We have an environmental question. Anna, assuming that the original deep cutting at the airport station was chosen as the optimised design solution, what are the detrimental impacts of the proposed shallower cutting, and how have these been mitigated in terms of environment and rail operation? Anna, hoping to bring you in on this question. If not, we can potentially come back. Anna, is that you? I think Anna's just on mute. Give us one moment, please.
Is that okay?
That's better. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, about this, we will ensure that assess any impact that can occur due to the deepest cutting. And we will include this assessment into the ES, the environmental statement, as part of the IB bill. And during the construction phase, any methodology, any measures will be included in the Code of Construction Practice to ensure we reduce, minimize, and avoid any impact on this. I hope I respond the question. Thank you.
Thank you. I got a couple of engineering questions in reference to the HS2 trains. I presume EU-wide trains and classic compatible trains. I think the question there is, are HS2 trains compatible with the EU trains, or ones in Europe? Gillian, are you able to cover that?
Yes, I can. So HS2 as it stands is looking at two separate procurements of two separate types of trains. So I guess we have what we call the classic compatible trains or conventional compatible trains, which are trains which are able to run on the existing NR infrastructure. So on the Manchester leg, we have a connection to the West Coast Main Line at Goulburn. So any of the trains which will be connecting onto the West Coast Main Line at Goulburn or at Crewe, etc., will be these conventional compatible trains. Now we also have a proposed procurement of a separate set of trains which would run on HS2 only, and those trains would essentially have a higher specification than the trains which are then also required to run on Network Rail because of the differences in signalling, etc., on the HS2 line, which will be ECTS, as opposed to Network Rail where there's conventional signalling. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Gillian. We have a question about where HS2 is visible on. So will HS2 be visible from homes on Burnside in Hale Barnes? Carol, would you be able to take that for me, please?
Yes, I'll try and give an overview. The full assessment of visual impacts will be in the final environmental statement, which will form part of the submission for the hybrid bill. But as part of the changes that we've made, the changes that we are proposing at the airport, there are some visualizations from Hale Barnes in that map book. So in the consultation map book, just after the proposals are for the changes around the road network around the airport, there are 1 or 2 visualizations which may help you to give you an idea of our initial assessment for these changes. But the detailed assessments about what visual impacts will be will form part of the final environmental submission. But we don't have them in detail at this point for the consultation. But there are some examples that you may wish to look at.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you very much. Stephen, a follow-up question. So Stephen commented that construction traffic from Ashley to the A538 was via Castlemill Lane and presumably Mill Lane, but these lanes are very narrow. Will widening these lanes be inevitable? Stephen, can I come back to you on that one?
Certainly can, Helen. Firstly, correct, yes, with our Castlemill Lane and then through Mill Lane out to the Winslow Road. Yes, we are aware that some of the roads in this area are quite narrow in places, and we will undertake some localised widening where necessary, but we intend to keep that to the very minimum so as not to change the character of the roads. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Stephen. I have a question around the through route. Sorry, my apologies, just give me one moment whilst I bring that question up. So will the line terminate above ground or underground to allow HS2 thoroughfare towards Leeds and Cumbria? Gillian, would you be able to take that one?
Yes, so I'm guessing this is a question about the Manchester Piccadilly station being above ground or underground. So we do have a consultation open about the Manchester Piccadilly station as well at the moment, and the designs for Manchester Piccadilly can be viewed as part of that consultation. So the design that we have for Manchester Piccadilly is a above ground station as it stands. We are looking and working with Northern Powerhouse Rail to ensure integration between the HS2 scheme and the Northern Powerhouse Rail scheme. And as part of the consultation that we had previously at Manchester Piccadilly, in Design Refinement Consultation 1, we did include some infrastructure for integration with Northern Powerhouse Rail for a turnout towards Leeds. But obviously this design is being developed and is being taken forward in collaboration with Northern Powerhouse Rail. So any updates on that will come in the future as well. But there is an open consultation for any comments on the Manchester Piccadilly station.
Thank you, Gillian. Carol, there's a question for you. If someone is affected, if someone is affected, is offered a meeting with HS2 and experts, but not feel comfortable attending without support, is there anything in place for them to be supported?
Thanks, Helen. We have several options really for an individual that is impacted. So as part of being impacted, HS2 will pay for up to 3 hours of professional advice. So what we suggest is that if you're impacted as part of and you're part of safeguarding, and for example your house is required to construct the railway line, we would suggest that you look on the RICS, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors website, and you can search for an expert in your area that specialises in compulsory purchase. So they could join you on the call, and as I said, we would pay for up to 3 hours of professional advice. But if you get a person identified through the RICS website, they do give the first 30 minutes for free also, so that may be of help. But if your concerns is about sort of advocacy and not having the confidence to take part in the meeting, we do have an independent provider which can provide advocacy support for you through Power. If you would contact us through our help desk and make us aware that you were looking for additional support, that is another offering that we could give you in terms of making sure you were comfortable in terms of having this one-to-one, as you say, with the experts and the appropriate people on the call. We will try to make sure that there are people around who can support you.
Thank you very much, Carol. There are a couple of questions around Brooks Drive, so I'll group those together and I'll ask Gillian to respond to them. So why do you require access along Brooks Drive during the construction phase? And the second part of that is, will Brooks Drive end up adopted by the council or remain a private road?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, Brooks Drive is required to for utility work. So to put an electricity connection under the carriageway of Brooks Drive. So it is not a construction traffic route. It won't be used for any of the mass haul movements or anything like that. It is only required for access for those utility works. In terms of the question around will Brooks Drive be adopted by the council or remain private, as far as HS2 are concerned, we would be only taking temporary access to Brooks Drives for that works. So we wouldn't have any say in whether or not the council would adopt it or if it would remain private. That would be a separate discussion, I guess, between the current private owner and the council. But we would only be looking at taking access to Brooks Drive in that temporary state for those utility works.
Thank you. There was a question around a kind of follow-up question around the cutting. So thank you for your answer on the environmental side of the cutting. Is the only reason the cutting is now shallower driven by cost alone, or there are other benefits? Gillian, would you be able to take that one?
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, albeit briefly, so by reducing the depth of the cutting, there's a significant reduction in the mass haul required. So essentially, the earthworks that need to be removed, and as part of that, that also results in a reduction in the number of traffic movements needed to take that mass haul out of the station area into other parts of the route for that mass haul to be reused. So there are environmental benefits by not having to move as many earthworks, because those would otherwise be transported on the road network. So it is not just a cost saving measure, but it also reduces the number of heavy goods vehicles which need to come in and out of the station for that removal.
Thank you, Gillian. There's a question, how can I contact the HS2 independent design panel as a member of the public? Paulette, I don't suppose you'd be able to respond to that one, would you?
I can take that question away and feed that back into the consultation response.
Fabulous, that's great. We will follow up with you after the webinar, as long as we have your contact details. If we don't, please do let me know. We have a question around compensation figures. Carol, how can the very low householder compensation figures have been set when the work to fully assess visual impact has not yet been done? Will the compensation amount increase?
I can't confirm if they will increase. They've been set as part of the HS2 route overall, so they're not. It's not by section. It's an overarching policy decision that we, as I explained when we were. We had a question earlier. This is a discretionary scheme that's over and above what is dictated by the Code of Compensation Practice, and I believe that through they would have been out for consultation some years ago and set. It may well be that that they may well take it back out for consultation again, but at this stage I believe that they're fixed and is part of our policy, and as I said, it is a discretionary scheme, and over and above what we need to do in law if we were to follow the Code of Compensation Practice.
Thank you, Carol. I have a slight concern that I've got a thank you. I've got a slight concern I may have slight reception issues, but I will hopefully everybody can still hear me. We had an earlier follow-up question around utilities. We will need to follow up with this after the session, but just to confirm that we have it as a follow-up, the utilities that run parallel to Hull Heath Lane look to be new utilities. What are these, and are they overground or underground? You and our utilities expert will follow up after this webinar, so we'll provide a response to you as long as we have your contact details. We have one further question. I think this is our final question that we have in around the tunnel size and dimensions. Gillian, are you able to pick that question up? I appreciate it's slightly outside of the MA06 area.
Yeah, that's all right. So I'm just trying to get that answer for yourself. Apologies.
In the meantime, it looks like Ewan can actually.
So the
if you want to hang on a moment, Gillian, Ewan can answer the question around the utilities. It just gives you a moment or two longer. Ewan, would you mind being able to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So I've just checked the plans.
Thank
so I believe these are high pressure gas pipelines that need to be diverted. So they're National Grid and Cadent high pressure gas. So they are new diversions underground.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's great. Apologies. And now back to Gillian, please, on the tunnel dimensions.
No problem. So the external diameter of each of the tunnel drives is 8 meters 55, and the internal diameter is 7 meters 55 at this point in design. Obviously, as we get towards detailed design, that will or that can be refined, but that is the current assumptions that we have for the diameters of the tunnel.
That's great. Thank you, Gillian. I will hand back to Jane now. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your questions. I hope you found that webinar really useful. If you'd like more information, please look at the HS2 website, as there's lots of information on there, such as maps, fact sheets and the consultation documents, and they're all available on here to see. And don't forget, the help desk is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the info is here on the screen. That's the conclusion of today's session. I'd like to thank you for taking part. Thank you again and have a great day.